Hello everyone, so welcome to the first session of this lovely evolution series, which will help you to crack bio very easily and comfortably for NEET. This is a 40-day crash course. Okay, so this is a 40-day crash course to revise all the bio chapters with 20 top 20 NEET questions, which are most repeated and very important. And secondly, they will cover almost all the concepts and theory of your respective chapters. Okay, so this is your evolution series. One more thing, in evolution series we will try to cover the questions. Alongside that, we will try to discuss the concept, or the what I should say is, we'll try to revise the theory or concept wherever involved behind the question, and also crack the question, which will help you to do a dual or a hybrid kind of a revision. Okay, so this is going to be a very helpful series for you. You will enjoy it definitely. We will post videos almost every day with some gaps some days, okay, as per the requirements. And we'll start with 20 questions. Now, where are these 20 questions going to be from? These are going to be from your exemplar, which is very used in NEET. It is going to be from your NEET PYQs at the maximum. They are going to be most important questions from NTA papers as well, and you will be absolutely able to cover all the concepts of the chapter using this. Okay, so this was a good introduction to the series. There's also a quick short video for the introduction as well. You can watch this also, and just read the NCERT of the chapter once before coming to the session, and you will be able to do it extremely well. Okay, so let's begin with the session. The chapter we are taking up today is Human Health and Disease from class 12th. All the chapters will be covered, and the detailed schedule I'll be posting very soon. Okay, so we'll start with Human Health and Disease. Let's begin. Alright, the first question of the day is, AIDS is caused by HIV. Among the following, okay, so this is a question on AIDS. Among the following, which one is not a mode of transmission of HIV? Okay, so here HIV is just a bit cut. Okay, so among which of the following is not a mode of transmission of HIV? Alright, let's understand. So whenever we talk about AIDS comes under the category of sexually transmitted disease, okay, which are transmitted due to mainly the sexual intercourse or the interchange of body fluids. Okay, the main method of transmission of sexually transmitted diseases is sexual intercourse and body fluid exchange. Okay, body fluid exchange. These are the most most frequent methods of transmission of an STD, sexually transmitted diseases like AIDS. Okay, so the first option is transfusion of contaminated blood. Obviously, blood is a body fluid, and body fluid, if it is affected with AIDS, definitely it will be leading to transmission. So this is the wrong option. You should not take it. This is wrong option. Second one, sharing the infected needles. Sharing the infected needles also is a very prominent method of transmission of AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases, because infected needles, whenever you inject the needle inside the body, the needle touches and pierces your blood, which is a body fluid. So if the blood is affected with AIDS, definitely the needle will also get affected in AIDS. That is why those people who are taking insulin injections or any intravenous injections, they have to be very sure that recyclable and unused needles are used. Fresh needles and syringes are used. Next, shaking hands with infected person. Obviously, this is not a method of transmission. If you shake hands, there is no exchange of body fluids. This is, as I told you before also, the exchange of body fluids is very crucial for transmission of a sexually transmitted disease. Okay, but shaking hands, there is no exchange of any fluid. Definitely you can transmit droplet diseases like cold or something, but these sexually transmitted diseases will never get transmitted if you shake hands with the infected person. So this is your correct option. This is a method which is not a mode of transmission of HIV. And the final one is the most prominent one, sexual contact with the infected person. Obviously it's a mode of transmission, there is no doubt about that. Okay, so mainly when we talk about AIDS, the mode of transmission of AIDS uses your needles, infected needles. Another mode of transmission is your sexual contact or your body fluid exchange. Another method is the infected blood. Okay, if the blood is infected and it is transmitted, that is also going to cause AIDS. Or you have mother to child. If the mother is infected, it can be transmitted to the child also through the placenta. So this happens through the placenta. Okay, so these are the modes of transmission. Shaking hands will never transmit HIV. Next question. SMAC is the drug obtained from. Okay, now when we talk about SMAC comes in the category of opioids. Okay, sorry, there's a little error in the spelling. Let me write it again. Alright, let's write it again. SMAC is a disease which comes from, it's a drug which comes from opioids. Okay, opioids. And opioids, the plant from which opioids are extracted is called Papaver somniferum. Okay, Papaver somniferum. Okay, so Papaver somniferum is the plant from which the opioids and the SMAC, heroin, morphine, these are all the opioid drugs. They are extracted from Papaver somniferum. This is a learning question as such. So if you know the fact, you will be able to answer this easily. Okay, so just remember, opioids, in category of opioids you have SMAC, in category of opioids you have heroin. These are all obtained from each other. In category of opioids you have morphine also. So these are all drugs which are extracted from Papaver somniferum plant. Okay, alright, so that was this question. Moving to the next question. Diseases are broadly grouped into infectious and non-infectious diseases. In the list given below, identify the infectious diseases. Okay, that's fine. So let's just quickly talk about these two categories first, because we are revising the theory alongside the questions. So whenever we are talking about infectious diseases, these are transmitted from person to person. Infectious means that these diseases are transmitted from one person to another, and that is why they are also called communicable diseases. Okay, and the other one, non-infectious, are those which are not transmitted. Okay, suppose person A has it and the person A comes in close contact with B, the non-infectious disease will not spread to person B. Okay, they are non-communicable. Another way to remember it is that infectious diseases are always caused by a pathogen. That is why they are communicable. Okay, an external microbe is causing the infectious diseases, and that is why they are communicable. Whereas the non-infectious diseases are not transmitted by any microbe, so that's why they are not communicable. They don't transmit from one person to another. So we have to identify the infectious ones. Let's see, cancer. Cancer, definitely, if one person is having cancer, the other person will not have cancer if it comes in contact. That's why people take care of cancer patients at home only, because this is not communicable. It's not caused by any pathogens. So cancer is not. Influenza is flu, which is kind of your common cold, only a severe form of common cold. Okay, it's different from common cold, but it's caused by a virus. So influenza definitely will be spreading from one person to another. Okay, allergy, let's talk about allergy. Allergy definitely is not communicable. If some person is allergic to pollen grains, it is not necessary that if he comes into contact with another person, that person will also get affected to pollen grains. Allergy is just due to a response from the body due to some triggered substances. It is not due to any pathogen, so it is not communicable. Smallpox was regarded as one of the most communicable and dangerous diseases of the earlier periods. Okay, so you can also remember like chickenpox and smallpox. These diseases easily spread through the family if one member is affected. Okay, so these are caused by pathogens, and that is why you have vaccines against them also. So influenza and smallpox are viral vaccinated diseases because they are caused by pathogens and they can easily transmit from one person to another. So 2 and 4 should be your correct option. Let's see this one. No, this one is correct. So D option is correct. Okay, this is your correct answer. All right, next question. We'll change the color to green. In malignant tumors, the cells proliferate, grow rapidly and move to other parts of the body to form new tumors. This stage of the disease is called. Alright, this we'll just understand. Now just remember, whenever we are talking about tumors, tumor is a large mass of cell. Tumors are of two types, malignant and benign. Benign tumors or malignant tumors. Benign tumors don't spread. So they don't spread, okay, and they don't cause cancer. Whereas we talk about malignant tumors can spread through blood and move to other parts of the body, which is given here. Okay, and that is why they spread through blood and they are cancerous. Okay. The property of malignant tumors to spread from one part of the body to another through blood and cause cancers is called metastasis. This you need to remember. The property of spreading of malignant tumors is called metastasis. And metastasis is the reason because for which cancer is caused. That tumor cells spread from one part to another, they cause new tumors in the new parts they go into, and that is called as metastasis, the spreading of tumors, and metastasis is the reason that cancer is caused. Okay. And definitely if you see other options, tetragenosis, metagenesis, mitosis, these are not related to cancer. Metastasis is the only term which is related to cancer. So you can do an odd one out also by chance if your theory is not true. But this is the logic behind it. Benign and malignant tumors, metastasis is the property through which malignant tumors spread. Okay. Just a second. Yeah. Next question. Which one of the following, okay, now question is, one of the following is not the causal organism for ringworm. Okay, ringworm, now this is again a learning question, not much theory behind it. Ringworm, you should remember, is a fungal disease, okay, which happens on the skin. You have lesions or white patches which are itchy on the skin. So suppose this is your skin and here you will have some like this. Let me just illustrate. Some like this white patches, okay, small white patches, okay, and these are itchy also. So these are your ringworms. Okay, now ringworm is caused by 3 genesis of funguses. So I'll just name them for you. Microsporum causes ringworm, Trichophyton causes ringworm, Epidermophyton causes ringworm, but Macrosporum does not cause ringworm. Okay, an easy thing to remember whenever we are talking about these two, micro and macro, just remember micro means virus, pathogen. Okay, not virus, pathogen. Pathogens are always small, they are microorganisms. So microorganism will cause the disease. So this is a trick which you can remember. Micro means small and microorganisms are small and they cause diseases. So microsporum causes a disease whereas macrosporum does not. Okay, so these are your ringworm. Fine, let's move further. Sorry. All right. Tobacco consumption is known to stimulate secretion of adrenaline and noradrenaline. This you should know. These are the 2 hormones from the adrenal gland, adrenaline and noradrenaline. Okay, the component causing this could be, all right, just remember one thing to answer this question. Is again a learning based question, but you can remember this, that tobacco has a component called nicotine. Okay, and all the symptoms mainly which are associated with the addiction of tobacco, the cancers, the increasing of carbon dioxide in the blood, all these are, and the secretion of adrenaline and noradrenaline, all these the effects of tobacco addiction are due to the nicotine. Okay, nicotine is the component which is there in tobacco which causes all the symptoms of tobacco. So these symptoms can include your cancer, these symptoms can include your carbon dioxide in blood and your hormonal secretion. Okay, so all these symptoms are due to the presence of nicotine, which is a stimulant to secretion of adrenaline, noradrenaline and other hormones and all the ill effects of tobacco. Okay, a trick to remember, in the television you must have seen ads like nicotine, Nicotex nicotine gums, which are to remove the addiction of tobacco and smoke, etc. So from that you can remember that nicotine is the constituent in tobacco addiction which causes all these things. Okay, so that's why tobacco is strictly prohibited. No one should ever take it because this is very harmful for the health. Okay, next. Yeah, here this is a very good question. Let me just zoom it a bit. I think it's a little small. Alright. In higher vertebrates, the immune system can distinguish self cells and non-self cells. Okay, this is an important property of the immune system, that it can distinguish its own cells and the non-self cells. If this property is lost due to genetic abnormality and it attacks self cells, then what does it lead to? Alright, a lot of terms are here. We'll try to understand this. Understand, in your body, when we talk about immunity, sorry, let me take the pen. When we talk about immunity, okay, when we talk about immunity, acquired immunity, in fact, it is mainly of two categories. The immunity is of two categories. One is humoral and one is cell mediated. Okay, humoral immunity is due to the secretion of antibodies, while cell mediated immunity is due to the secretion of T lymphocytes. And this T lymphocyte helps the body to distinguish between self and foreign cells. Okay, so what does it do? It has a distinguish between self and non-self cells. Can easily distinguish. This feature of distinguishing is called as your cell mediated immunity, because it is mediated by these cells. CMI, cell mediated immunity. Okay, and that's how the body can easily reject any foreign cells, and any cells from another organism in our body is rejected until and unless we give an immunosuppressant which will suppress the immune system not to reject it. That's your cell mediated immunity. But sometimes due to genetic disorders, as it is mentioned in the question, cell mediated immunity is lost and the body starts attacking self cells only. Until and unless the cell mediated immunity was there, the body was attacking the non-self cells, because these are not belonging to you, so the body will attack them. But if the cell mediated immunity is lost, the body starts attacking the self cells only. Okay, because it forgets to distinguish between own and non-self, and it starts attacking itself. So what that condition is called is an autoimmune disease. Now how do you remember it is autoimmune? Easy way to remember is autoimmune means immune to itself. The body is attacking your own cells, immune to itself. Okay, and that is how you can call it as autoimmune disease. Okay, autoimmune means about the disease in which the body is immune to itself. Immune means it starts attacking the foreign cells. Instead of foreign cells, it starts attacking the self cells and damages itself. Okay, that is called autoimmune disease. Okay, all right. Okay, let me zoom this question a bit also. The chemical test that is used for the diagnosis of typhoid is, okay, very important question. Now for this question, what I want to tell you, it's again a learning question. You know that those of you who have studied this chapter would be knowing the answer is Widal test. Widal test is used to detect typhoid. Okay, but let me quickly tell you the other tests also. Okay, ELISA is enzyme linked immunosorbent assay, and this is the test which is used to detect AIDS. PCR, polymerase chain reaction, is used to detect cancer. Okay, polymerase chain reaction is a method to detect cancer. AIDS detecting method is ELISA. ESR means erythrocyte. E for erythrocyte. Erythrocyte means RBC. So this is a kind of a blood test which is for RBCs, which is for anemia, etc. Okay, because E stands for erythrocyte, so this is a kind of a blood test. Okay, for typhoid, your test is Widal test. Okay, that confirms typhoid. Typhoid is a disease caused by the bacterium Salmonella typhi, and that is confirmed using the Widal test. Okay, this is one of the most important questions as well. Next question. Okay, antibody is present in the colostrum which protect the newborn from certain disease is of the type. All right, let's understand this. When we talk about antibodies, antibody is written as IG something, an alphabet. IG stands for immunoglobulin. Immunoglobulin means globulin is a protein. Globulins are the proteins in the blood which are responsible for resisting diseases. Okay, so antibodies are molecules made up of those globulins which are important for resistance against diseases. They can be of various types. Okay, what you should know for antibodies, the 4 types which are important for you is IgG. IgG is the most abundant antibody. Maximally found antibody in the body is IgG, most abundant. Okay. The next antibody is IgA. Just a second. Yeah. IgA is the antibody which is present in the mother's milk called colostrum. What is colostrum? Colostrum is the mother's milk in the initial period. Okay, it is the initial period, and here you have IgA type of antibodies, colostrum. Okay, and this, what is the importance of this? The importance of this is that it helps to give immunity to the fetus, so that the fetus can fight, not the fetus, actually the newborn baby, so that the infant can fight, okay, so that the infant can fight the diseases, because initially after birth the infant is very prone to all diseases. It is not very developed in its immune system, it's very weak. So the mother's milk is recommended because it contains colostrum, which has this IgA antibody, which helps the fetus to fight and resist infections in the early stages of life. IgD type antibody. IgD type antibody is present in the B lymphocytes. Okay, this you don't need to remember too much, not very important. And finally, you have the antibody called IgE, which is also very important. And IgE is the antibody which is responsible for allergies. Okay, responses to allergies and allergic reactions occurs due to the IgE antibody. IgA is for colostrum and IgE is for allergies. Okay, so IgA is the correct answer, colostrum is your correct answer, IgA. Alright, let's move forward. Transplantation of tissues, organs fails due to the non-acceptance by the patient's body. Which type of immune response is responsible for such rejection? Which we just discussed 2 questions back. When the body has a distinguishing ability of self and non-self, that is the answer. Okay, self and non-self, the body is able to distinguish easily, and it rejects the non-self cells, and that's why in transplants this leads to a really big problem, and that is why you need to give immunosuppressants which suppress this immune response, and a transplant or a blood transport can be done in humans. Okay, so self and non-self, and the immunity which distinguishes it is called CMI, cell mediated immunity. That's your answer. Autoimmune we have discussed. Autoimmune happens when the body is not able to distinguish self and non-self, and it starts attacking itself. Cell mediated, it is rejecting the other cells because it is distinguishing self and non-self. Humoral is the antibody. Okay, humoral immunity is the response to the antibodies. And physiological means through enzymes. Okay, saliva, HCl, which are killing the microbes in the body, that is the physiological immunity. Okay, fine. Next, if you suspect major deficiencies of antibodies in a person, to which of the following would you look for confirmatory evidence? So what is the question talking about? Deficiency of antibodies. Okay, fibrinogen, serum albumins, hemocytes, serum globulins. Alright, so for this you need to just remember that in the blood you have your plasma, and you have your blood cells, which are called the formed elements. Blood cells are your RBC, WBC, platelets, etc. Plasma will contain blood proteins and water. So water will be there definitely, and you will have a lot of proteins, ions, okay, etc. The proteins are of 3 types. Albumins, which are for, okay, let me just write it a little bigger. This is going too small. Okay, the proteins, the first category of proteins was your albumins. Albumins are responsible for osmotic balance of the body. The second type of protein was your fibrinogen, and this you can easily understand. Fibrinogen stands for fibers, and fibers are required for clotting of the blood after an injury. So fibrinogen are responsible for clotting factors. And you have your globulins, which I just told you a few questions back. They are responsible for immunity. That is why antibodies are called immunoglobulins, because they are proteins made up of globulins which are responsible for immunity. Okay, so if deficiency of antibodies happens, which one do you think will be absent? Will fibrinogen be less? Fibrinogen has no connection with antibodies, it's just for clotting, so not fibrinogen. Serum albumins. Albumin, will it be albumin? No, albumin is just for osmosis. This is for osmosis and water potentials in the body. So nothing related to antibodies. Hemocytes. Heme means hemoglobin, red blood cells. So hemocytes are related to your RBC because heme for hemoglobin. No, serum globulins. Yes, that's the answer. Serum globulins, because globulins are the proteins which are made which make antibodies and which are responsible for resisting infection. Just remember, antibodies are also called immunoglobulins. Okay, IG, IgA, IgG. Okay, why IG? Because they are immunoglobulins. Serum is just the blood. Okay, blood without any formed element and clotting factor is called serum. So that's not a very tough term. Okay, so antibodies are related to globulin, so globulin will be your answer for the question. Okay, and I've given you a brief description about the composition of blood, which is also very important for your circulatory system chapter as well. Okay, let's move forward. Next, when an apparently healthy person is diagnosed as unhealthy by a psychiatrist, the reason could be that. Okay, now first of all, there's a lot of hints in this question, but before going to this question, we need to understand one very basic thing. What is the definition of health? This is the introduction to your chapter also, but many people forget this. The definition of health is a well-being. Okay, it's a well-being, but in terms of what? Physical well-being, that you are free from any disease. Okay, second well-being is your mental, that you are free from any trauma or any stress, anxiety, etc. And next is behavioral. Behavioral means that your behavior is abnormal, you are restless, you have anxiousness, stress, anxiety, etc. That is behavioral. So when a person is well in all these aspects, not only physically, all these aspects, then a person is called healthy. Now here what we have understood is a person looked healthy, that means he has no physical impairment. Okay, but he is diagnosed unhealthy by a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist is a doctor of brains, emotions. Okay, so what would be the reason? You know that if he is physically healthy but still is called unhealthy, definitely he will be either mentally disturbed or he will have some behavioral issues. So first option, the patient was not efficient at his work. No. Physically he is well. The patient was not economically prosperous. No. He does not take interest in sports. No, that is not the main thing. The interest in sports is not a big category to mention health. The patient shows behavioral and social maljudgment. That's correct. Okay, that's correct. Because as I told you to remember, a person is completely healthy if he is healthy in all aspects. Okay, your physical aspects very, very important, but mental, pressure and behavioral aspects are also equally important. Social aspects also. We will also write social. How he is behaving towards society, how he is behaving towards other people is equally important to describe a person healthy or unhealthy. That's also an equally important topic. Okay, so this is your definition for health. Injection of antitoxin in tetanus confers which type of immunization? Okay. Now see, whenever we talk about immunization, the main types of immunity, especially acquired when we are talking about, there are two types, Okay, there are two types here. The first one is active and the second one is passive. Active means when you are injecting weakened pathogens in your body so that the body itself produces antibodies and you get an immunity by yourself. So here what you are putting, what happened here? Just got some issue is happening with this software. Just a second. Yeah, now it's fine. So in active, what happens is you are injecting weakened pathogens and body produces antibodies against it. Okay, so that's why obviously if your body is producing antibodies, it will take time. So this is time consuming. It is high on time. Okay, the most crucial types of active immunity are your vaccinations. Vaccine against polio, vaccine against chickenpox, tetanus, COVID. They are all the active immunities. You are putting the vaccine which will make your body itself produce antibodies, and when the actual pathogen comes, it will attack it. The second type is your passive. passive is opposite to it. You are putting ready-made antibodies. You're putting ready-made antibodies. That means definitely it is going to be a fast method, but this is for a shorter time. It lasts for a shorter time. It's a fast method, but it's not completely lastable. Otherwise, the active would have never happened only. Passive is not very reliable completely, and sometimes it can cause a reaction also. But in certain cases, it is required. You're putting ready-made antibodies, and that's why it is going to act very fast. You're not letting them form. You're already putting the formed antibodies. Okay. Now in tetanus, what we talk about, tetanus happens when generally you fall on a road or you fall on a metal iron pipe, etc. Then you get tetanus. Okay. Tetanus virus can spread very quickly, so you cannot afford to spend a lot of time vaccinating against it. You need to get ready-made antibodies which will go and kill the virus. So what we need for tetanus is passive immunization. Okay. Another case for passive immunization which we should remember is a snake bite. Okay, in snake bite also the anti-venom is required immediately. You cannot wait for a long time. You need the anti-venom so that the venom does not spread, the poison does not spread, and you get cured easily and fast. Okay, so in snake bites also what we need is your passive immunization, where you are getting the antibodies readily and it acts very fast. Okay, so that's your answer. Okay, very important question, factual. Which organ reduces its size with age? Okay, spleen. Let me just quickly give you a quick description of the organ. Spleen is responsible for storing RBCs and also for lymphatic immunity. Thymus is a secondary lymphoid organ. Is a primary lymphoid organ where lymphocytes mature. Thyroid and pituitary are your endocrine glands. Okay, the answer for this question, thymus also is endocrine, is your thymus. Thymus is a special gland because thymus reduces with age. So if you compare the thymus gland of a child and of a 90-year-old person, definitely the first thymus of a child will be very large as compared to the 90-year-old person. Now, how do we understand it in the practical life? Very simple to understand that when a person is old, the person gets ill very often. The person gets ill, starts coughing, sneezing very often. Thymus gland generally provides a thymus hormone as well, which is a site for which is a hormone which also induces immunity. If thymus gland becomes smaller, the hormone amount will also be less and the immunity will become weak. That's why. So if you have a 10-year-old, maybe this is the thymus. If you have a 90-year-old, maybe this is the thymus. This difference can happen. Okay, and this will lead to a weakened immunity for an adult, or for an old person. Old person will fall ill very frequently as compared to the young person. The reason is the immunity is weak because thymus has reduced. Okay, so thymus is the answer. Okay, next question. Alright, this question we just similar question on SMAC we did, where SMAC is obtained from which plant, but now the question is, SMAC is a drug obtained from which of the following processes? Very important question. Okay, SMAC is a drug which is made from which of the following processes? Now remember this, SMAC, the first drug which we directly extract from the Paperworm somniferum plant, the opioid. In opioids, the first thing which we get is morphine, which is a painkiller. Then in morphine, what do we do is alkylation. Okay, in morphine, just a second, there is a little issue with the software, let me just fix it. Yeah, now it's working. So it just got hanged a bit. Okay, yeah, now it's fine. Alright, so after in morphine, what we do is we do a diacetylation of morphine. Okay, we do a diacetylation of morphine and we get the second compound, which is heroin. Okay, from the diacetylation of morphine we get the second compound, which is heroin. Now in heroin, from heroin, the next process that happens is crystallization. Okay, crystallization, cooling, and some modifications also happen. We're not going into details of that, but the main process is crystallization, and that gives you smack. Smack is a white colored, colorless to white, fade white colored compound which is formed by crystallization of heroin at a certain temperature and pressure, and you get this. So morphine to heroin to smack. So you can remember like this, MHS. MHS is the process. So let's see which option. Heroin to morphine, no, this is wrong. Morphine to heroin through dissolution, wrong. Morphine to heroin through crystallization, that's correct. Okay. First morphine, heroin, and then crystallization of heroin, you will get smack. Okay. So this is the process for formation of smack. And the main thing to remember, paperworm somniferum is the plant and opioids is the category of smack. Okay, which question do we go now? Yeah, this one. Match the following diseases with their causative pathogen. So again, this is a learning question. So let's see if you can remember this. Malaria, the malarial pathogen is called as Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium malaria, a lot of Plasmodium. The most common one is your Plasmodium vivax. Okay, so I'll match it, try to match it with different colors. Okay, so that you can clearly understand it. Okay, typhoid we discussed. Only Salmonella typhi is the organism for typhoid. Let's change the color to go to the next one. Pneumonia is called by Streptococcus pneumoniae and Haemophilus influenzae. So this is your correct answer, Streptococcus pneumoniae and Haemophilus influenzae. Amoebiasis, this is easy, you can directly know. Amoebiasis, entamoeba. So amoebiasis is called amoebic dysentery, it is caused by amoeba. The form of amoeba is called entamoeba histolytica. Easy to remember. And this also we did a few questions back. The ringworm is caused by Microsporum, Epidermophyton and Trichophyton. So Microsporum is given, so ringworm is with Microsporum. Okay, so for all the diseases which are given in the NCERT, please do learn the causative agent, the type of causative agent, whether it's a bacteria, virus, whatever it is, the epidemiology, the way of transmission, and the common symptoms, and if a specific test is there to detect it as well. Please learn them. Okay, next question. What are the respective hosts of sexual and asexual reproduction in Plasmodium? So for this you need to be very clear with the life cycle of Plasmodium. Okay, I'll take up the life cycle very quickly. Okay, brief we'll discuss the life cycle. So in Plasmodium what happens is, when the mosquito bites the human, so mosquito bites the human, what are injected in the human are sporozoites. This happens in the human liver cells. Then these sporozoites from the liver cells, they move to the RBCs and multiply asexually. They multiply asexually and they form sexual stages called as gametocytes. Okay, this causes the rupturing of RBC and the release of hemazoin, and all that is also caused. So this you should know already. But we are interested in the life cycle of the mosquito at the moment, not for the malarial topic. Okay. Alright. So gametocyte. Then when the mosquito bites the human again, infected human. Now here again the mosquito, you already know the mosquito is female Anopheles mosquito. Okay, when the female Anopheles mosquito bites the human, it takes up through the blood, it takes up these gametocytes. Okay, it takes up these gametocytes. So here you have the mosquito, it bites the human, it takes up these gametocytes, and these gametocytes in the intestine of the mosquito, they fuse. Gametocytes are basically gametes. Gametes are sexual reproduction organ units. They will fuse, they will fertilize. Okay, gamete and gamete will fertilize, and you get a new stage again called your sporozoites. So if fertilization is happening, what kind of reproduction will it be inside the mosquito? Sexual. Okay, gametes will be fusing and form the spores. So this is obviously sexual reproduction because fusion of gametes is happening, syngamy is happening. Okay, and that's how the life cycle is completed. Then the next bite, the sporozoites are again induced into the human with the next bite. Okay, this is the complete life cycle of the Plasmodium which we have discussed. So from this what we can conclude in this life cycle is that the Hosts of asexual reproduction, that is just the multiplication of sporozoites, happens in the humans. So asexual reproduction, the host for it is the human. Okay, so asexual reproduction of the mosquito is in human, whereas the sexual reproduction and fertilization happens in the female Anopheles mosquito. Okay, so first we have to write the sexual one. The sexual one is female Anopheles, which is given here, and asexual is human. So fourth option is correct. Okay. Please remember that malaria is caused by, the vector for malaria is female Anopheles. Aedes is for chikungunya and dengue, and Culex mosquito is for elephantiasis. Okay, so these vectors you need to remember. All right. Moving to the next question now. Okay, select the odd one out. So let's first understand, read the terms, and then we'll find which is the odd one. Biopsy. What is biopsy? Biopsy is a cancer detection method. CD for cancer detection. You cut a tissue of the tumor and you stain it and you observe it in the microscope to get whether a tumor or a cancer is forming or not. Computer tomography, CT scan. CT scan again is a cancer detection method, because these are all terms related to cancer. Okay, so CT scan is a cancer detection method where multiple images are combined like this. Multiple single dimensional images are combined and a complete 3D image is formed for study. That is a CT scan. Chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is a method with which chemical drugs you destroy a tumor. That is basically a method of treating a cancer. Chemotherapy, radiations, okay, surgery. These are methods of treating a cancer. So CT I will write, cancer treatment. Whereas we talk about X-ray. X-ray again is a method of detecting cancer. Okay, from using X-ray, they will penetrate through the tumor cells and they will form one-dimensional images. And when you compile these one-dimensional images, you will get the CT scan. So CT scan is just a collection of X-ray. X-ray is a more basic method of cancer detection. This is also a CD. So which is the odd one out? Chemotherapy is the odd one out, because the other three methods talk about cancer detection, whereas chemotherapy talks about cancer treatment. Okay, so that's what the odd one out is. Alright. So whenever you get the question on odd one out, figure out what kind of topic are these words talking about. Then only you'll be able to find out an odd one out. Okay. So that was your question. Next. Which of the following is a long-term preventive measure against dengue? So when we talk about dengue, the virus for dengue, obviously filarivirus, for dengue we cannot kill the virus directly. You know? Treating the virus, preventing by killing the virus is not possible. Virus will be only active in a host. So how to prevent against dengue? The prevention which we can do is by preventing the vector. Okay, and the vector is your female Aedes mosquito. Okay, this is your vector. If the female Aedes mosquito cannot bite a human, then obviously the virus will not be able to reach and the virus will be inactive. It will be of no threat. Absolutely. Okay. So the prevention against any vector-borne diseases will be aiming to eradicate the vector. Let's see. The first one is mosquito repellent. This can treat the vector definitely. Wire meshes and doors. This can also lead to stopping of some mosquitoes to some extent. Prevent stagnant water in coolers. This will also stop mosquitoes to a certain extent, because mosquitoes will breed in stagnant water. This is the area of breeding. Okay. Next one is Gambuskia fish in water bodies. Now what is Gambuskia fish? Gambuskia fish, if you will search in the internet, these are also called mosquito fish, because they eat mosquito larvae. Okay, the babies of the mosquito Gambuskia fish eats it, and if the larvae only gets eaten, how will an adult mosquito be formed? So which one? All of these are methods to prevent against dengue, but which is the long-term preventive measure? This one, Gambuskia fish. Okay, why? Just understand repellents, wire meshes, preventing of stagnant waters in coolers to such an extent. These are all not very reliable. Sometimes you may just forget to do it. We open the door and that may be just sufficient time for the mosquito to come in. Okay, Odomos and other mosquito repellents will only work for a certain period of time, not always. But if you introduce Gambuskia in water bodies, they will eat the larvae only and an adult mosquito will not be formed only. Okay, so this is a long-term preventive measure for dengue. And one important point again, that whenever you have to prevent against a vector-borne disease, we don't need to eradicate the pathogen. If we eradicate and control the vector, that will itself protect us. The pathogen cannot reach to us without the vector, and it will be of no use, no harm, the pathogen. Okay, so the vector is the main cause of the disease. Okay, so Gambuskia is your answer. Last question for the day. This one I thought of giving as a homework question, but this question many people are quite insecure with. Okay, so let us try to understand this. A person with sickle cell anemia is more prone to malaria, more prone to typhoid, less prone to malaria, less prone to typhoid. Okay, so what do you feel? Which should be the option here? What do you think should be the answer here? Malaria or typhoid? Obviously, the typhoid won't be an answer. Sickle cell anemia, when you talk about, is a disease of the RBCs. Okay, you must have studied it in your Principles of Inheritance chapter. This is a disease of RBCs, where the RBCs, which are generally biconcave like this, they turn kind of sickle like this. It's not absolutely correct shape. The crescent like this you can talk about. These are sickle, these shapes. And what do they result in? They block the blood capillaries because of this larger shape, and blood loss is happening. Blood is not transported well, and you get anemia. Now, when we talk about this sickle cell anemia, RBC, which disorder, typhoid or malaria, is associated with RBC? Obviously, typhoid has no relation with RBC. It's just a disorder of your lungs, alveoli of the lungs. There's no use with RBC. Whereas malaria is having a use with RBC, which we have just discussed in this life cycle of Plasmodium here, that your RBCs are the target area for the sporozoites. So malaria is a disorder in which the RBCs are affected. So definitely the typhoid options will be ruled out. Now we have to understand whether the person is going to be affected with malaria more or less if it has sickle cell anemia. Okay. The answer is the person is less prone to malaria. Okay. This is the correct answer. The reason is your malarial sporozoites, the sporozoites of the Plasmodium. Suppose these are your, let me change the color. Suppose these are your Plasmodium sporozoites. They enter the RBC and they destroy it and rupture it, and they release hemozoin and multiply. But when they will enter this sickle celled RBC, like this is a little larger, okay, larger, and it's kind of a thicker RBC. The Plasmodium will find it very difficult to break this. The Plasmodium will find it very difficult to break this. It may be to a certain extent can break it, definitely it can, but it's very difficult for the Plasmodium to reach this directly. And this, what will this lead to? This will lead to less malaria. If the Plasmodium cannot reach the RBC, it won't multiply, it won't cause the rupturing of RBC, it won't cause hemozoin release, and malaria will not be caused too much. So that's why what we can say is, if the person has sickle cell anemia, if it has the sickle celled RBCs, the RBCs will be difficult to attack by the Plasmodium sporozoites. Okay, and if the Plasmodium sporozoites cannot attack it, hemozoin release, rupturing of RBC is not possible to a larger extent, and the person is less prone to malaria. Okay, typhoid as such is ruled out because sickle cell anemia is a trait of RBCs and malaria is linked with RBC, not typhoid. And because of this crescent structure, it is less prone to malaria. That's your answer. So this C option is correct. Okay, very important question, so you please understand it carefully. Okay, and that completes your question on sickle cell anemia and sporozoites. So that's it. With that, we are done with this class of your human health and disease. We have cracked the questions. What to do now at home? You can once again read the chapter, okay, to clarify if you have doubts. You can take out any past year question paper of NEET and solve the questions of this chapter. More questions definitely are available. You can solve. Okay, and you can practice. Definitely once you should go through the NCERT exercise also. Though it has subjective questions, but a lot of concepts will get covered in that also, and you'll be able to do it well. So this you can do for your homework. Revise the NCERT exercise. Okay, this chapter is done very well. Almost all the concepts I have taken, important questions of NEET I have taken, and you have done it extremely well. In the next video of this series of evolution, we will go to the class 11th chapter, digestion and absorption. Okay, digestion and absorption. So you will come prepared for that. Just read the NCERT for that one. Only read it well, line by line. If there is any diagram, go through the diagram, and you will be prepared for attending the session on digestion. Okay, tomorrow or maybe day after tomorrow, okay, we'll do the next session. I'll upload a short video for announcing the date of the session. Just read the NCERT once again, and you'll be very prepared for that session also. So this chapter is done. Thank you from my side. Take care, stay safe, stay at home. Okay, and please subscribe the channel, like the video, and if you have enjoyed the video and if you find anything which is fruitful, please do comment. Okay, and subscribe and like definitely. Thank you so much. Take care.